Hello, and welcome back to another episode of SDR Console for FMDX. My name is Bryce, and today we are back for episode number 6 of this series. And I'm really excited because this episode and the next few episodes, we're going to take everything we learned in episode number 1 through 5 and put it into practice by reviewing some of my favorite and appropriate for this series IQ files that are in my archive. And we're going to go over a few different modes of propagation, take everything that we've learned, and figure out how to maximize FMDX and go through some tips and tricks on how to review and think about certain modes of propagation, especially with IQ files and reviewing them post facto in SDR console. So today I want to go ahead and rip the band-aid off by starting with one of the most challenging modes of propagation in this hobby, which is Meteor Scatter. Meteor Scatter is something that I think many FMDXers have currently, and especially previous to the SDR era, written off because they just view it as being too challenging. Their local conditions or signal environment that they're in are very cluttered, and it can be just a really difficult mode of propagation because of how brief the signals are, and sometimes signals are weak or jumbled up. I'm going to assume that you understand the principles of Meteor Scatter today, so I won't explain the mode, but I think it's a pretty simple mode of propagation just with meteors burning up through the ionosphere. So today we're going to pull open the data analyzer, which I already have open on the right-hand side of my screen. We ran over this feature in depth in episode number 5. And in that episode, we also talked about how you can save and then quickly reopen files. That's what I've done here by hitting the open button here in this project and pulling open this file that I have already loaded and saved. So this should load relatively quickly. Now, it still is going to take a few seconds because this is a 4-hour-long file that was recorded in April of 2024 during the Lyrids meteor shower. I will say we're going to review 2 files today. I'm going to start with this one, which I consider the easier of the 2 files that I have in my archives for the episode today. And that's just because there were deadband conditions during the Lyrids meteor shower of 2024, in that there's not a lot of tropospheric enhancement or aircraft scatter. It was taken in the middle of the night on April 25th. The next file that we're going to review came from the Perseids meteor shower, which is in August, and here in the United States, there's typically a lot of tropospheric enhancement going on during those warmer summer months. You may have that experience too, or that file may be reflected of a more crowded band. I have a pretty crowded band here, but there are definitely worse FM bands that DX'ers deal with, especially in North America. So I'm scrolling through this file on the right-hand side, and you may be already able, based on what we talked about in episode 5, to spot some of the meteor bursts that are going on here. There's one right here. You can see right here a large fade up. Part of what we're going to be talking about today is distinguishing meteors from other modes of propagation. And I will say this is a pretty good demonstration of what I believe to be aircraft scatter, or perhaps a tropospheric scatter fade up. So you'll see these signals that come in very slowly and leave very slowly. To give you some scale, this signal right here that I'm hovering my mouse over came in and left over the period of over 2 minutes. Typically something with gentle fade ups and gentle fade outs like this is not meteor scatter. And then when we get here, about 2 minutes after that fade up, you'll see this very abrupt and short fade up right here. And you'll see perfectly corresponding signals at that exact time on the 3 other frequencies. This is about a 1 megahertz. I think it's specifically 912 kilohertz. So it captures 4 FM frequencies of 104.9, 105.1, 3, and 105.5. I have a regional signal on 105.1 that's quite strong, so we're probably not going to see much DX there. But these other 3 frequencies are workable, specifically 104.9 and 105.3. So now that we've kind of seen what a meteor scatter signal looks like compared to some other modes of propagation, and you can continue seeing that here on 105.1, where a more distant, 105.5. Did I say 105.7 earlier? Yeah, 105.5 is this frequency right here. There is a signal about 120 kilometers from me, a relatively small signal, about 70 or 80 miles for those of you in the States who use miles. That signal is coming in and out weekly over the course of this file. you'll see it kind of fading in and out. And then these two frequencies, 104.9 and 105.3, are much more workable. So let's pull up some of these meteor scatter bursts, listen to them, and go over some techniques, and then we'll dive into our more complicated file. Let's get started. All right, so we're going to start by taking a look at this right here. So this is interesting because you can see some non-meteor activity here. Again, you see the gentle fade ups of 105.5 and 104.9. There are two signals in the same region in the direction that the antenna is pointed, and I'll bet it's them. So let's check that out first so you can get an idea of what meteor scatter doesn't look like. I'm going to keep the music fairly low to avoid YouTube issues, but you can see, especially if I expand my window a little bit here, that this is one of those regional signals I was suspecting. You can see the the RDS window right here that has information about this station in Middletown, Connecticut, which is a regional signal for me. I'm going to pop open as well. We talked about MPX forwarding in the RDS episode number 3. I'm going to pop that open so we have both the RDS data from SDR console along with RDS Spy available to us. Okay, so now we've kind of seen this non-meteor scatter fade up. Probably a similar situation on 105.5. If I pull that open, we'll probably get a decode from another signal in the state of Connecticut, regional to me. And then you can see during this time, there's a much more abrupt signal fading up here on 105.3. So let's check that out. I think that might be meteor scatter. Yeah, that does sound like meteor scatter. Let's hit it again and see if we can get some RDS. So there it is. We get this Bowden, Georgia, WRDG. It's about 800 or 900 miles away from me and is a valid meteor burst. I have logged that station before on that frequency. So you can see, you may have been able to hear that I actually clicked on that signal a few times. You can see that it's not really readily decoding because the signal is not particularly strong. I'm going to pull this spectrum view up a little bit. We talked about that in the RDS episode number 3. And I'm going to tell you something that I look for when I'm looking at these meteor scatter bursts, which is, again, a recap from episode number 3, the RDS carrier that I'm hovering my mouse over right here. So if I play this again, you might be able to see these two little peaks that come up right there, which is indicating that there is RDS being transmitted. And you can see it picking up in the SDR console native RDS section. A lot of times it takes, especially when signals are not particularly long, they're not strong, or the station itself is not transmitting a super strong RDS signal, it takes multiple attempts to pull up RDS. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple more meteor fade ups in this file. We're going to turn to 105.3 and take a look at this one. So I'm going to adjust my filter width to make sure I have the most amount of bandwidth possible without dipping into the analog signal of 105.1. So I'm going to use the asymmetrical filters that we discussed in a past episode, I believe episode 2, actually it was the beginning of episode 3. I'm going to widen out the filter on the right-hand side as much as possible and play this and see what happens. So you can hear this is a strong signal. And you can see now the RDS Spy piped in from MPX output actually decoded something. It says WZ. I don't know if that's an American call sign or not, but we see the PI code of 7B79. So because that does not have automatic decode, I'm going to pull open FM list. I had another video talking about logging stations with FM list, and let's look up 105.3, type in 7B79 and see what this is. And we get WOSF of Gaffney, South Carolina. I'm not going to log this in FM list right now. Again, we had another video talking about that. But here we have another meteor scatter signal, and this was just in the course of 10 minutes. So we'll go over a couple more and see if we can find anything else. So here I hear some classic country on 104.9 here. Pretty unique format in the United States. And we're not really seeing any RDS. And you can hear that compared to the previous Meteor Scatter bursts, this one is a little more distorted, not quite as clear. Got another country station on 105.5. This is a much stronger signal. Let's see if we see anything in this RDS carrier section. I don't think so. And we'll also check 105.3 here. This one has a fairly weak signal, but it is a few seconds long burn, so we might be able to get audio out of it. I'll turn up the audio a little bit since there's no music. And you'll notice I always repeat things a few times because sometimes even signals that are not particularly strong, if they have strong RDS injection and you go over the meteor ping in the analyzer a few times, you might actually get a surprise RDS decode. Now that one didn't have anything, and it's some generic talk, I think maybe sports talk, but I could not decipher anything that sounded like an ID or a commercial or anything that we could identify. All right, let's go over one other meteor burn before we turn to our more challenging file, our other IQ file that I'm going to review today. And we have a burn here that has a little, I'm not even going to call it a burn, a small ping here on 104.9 and 105.3. Let's check that out. Very brief. Sounds like a classic rock song. Not getting any RDS. So this one sounds like it might be a local commercial on a station somewhere. Let's play it a few times. Now, for the sake of entertainment here, I'm not going to beat this signal up too much, but I might see something down here. I don't know, but there could possibly be some RDS embedded here. And if I was really desperate to get an ID on this, I might play it, about 100 times and might be able to pull something out. But alas, these are probably going to be unidentified signals. I did actually, before moving to the next file, wanted to take a look at maybe a longer burn of Meteor Scatter just to give some context of what this mode can yield. So let's kind of scroll through the 4 hours in this file and look and see what the most robust Meteor Scatter burn we can see in this file is. So let's do it like this. There's a pretty good one right there. This one is pretty good. It looks to be about almost 10 seconds long. Sometimes meteor burns can be almost as long as 60 seconds. Sometimes we'll call those meteor trains. I don't see any of those here, although I will say those very long meteor burns can sometimes be extremely jumbled up. There's lots of signals. It can actually be really hard to identify anything in those larger meteor burns. I find the most productive forms of meteor scatter to be these roughly 5-second long burns with strong signals. So we have a couple of those here. Let's check this one out. Based on how this looks, I bet this will be one of those jumbled up kind of burns, but let's see. I already see an RDS decode. I'm coming back. I miss you. So yeah, you can hear the jumbled up, the fluttering of these signals. You can hear that fluttery kind of sound and the noise, but you did see here that RDS Spy did pop open a RDS decode of 11E0. You might remember that from the beginning of the file. That's that signal in Georgia in the United States. So we've already logged that one in this file, and we've heard it again. And you will notice, especially for those in the United States where there's some 100,000 watt signals, particularly those with stronger RDS, you'll end up in Meteor Scatter, once you get successful with it using these tools, you'll hear the same stations over and over again, and it can actually be a challenge to dig out some of the ones you don't hear so often. So that could be a fun way to engage with this. So I am clicking around on some other things, seeing if we can get some RDS decodes. Take a look at this one real quick without the audio on. You'll see the South Carolina here. which is another station we logged already. There's a couple of those big powerhouse signals on this 105.3 frequency. Okay, and before I go too long down this rabbit trail, let's go ahead and move on to another IQ file. And I think this one is going to be more reflective of maybe some of the more unfortunate DX environments that many of us find ourselves in. This is from the Perseids meteor shower of August 2022. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, the Perseids can be a lot more challenging, particularly for areas in the northern hemisphere where there is summer enhancement, particularly along the coastlines. And you'll see this is the same 4-frequency, 900 kilohertz wide scenario, but you'll see I have signals on every single frequency. And I think many people, many DX'ers, particularly in that analog era, would write this environment off as somewhere where I'm probably not going to hear any meteor scatter. But I know that to not be the case with this file. There's actually a few burns in here that we can use techniques to dig out from the clutter. So let's pull up the contrast wheel, which is this little button up here. I believe if you expand this window a little bit further, you can see it'll say contrast. So if you enable that, it'll pop up another contrast bar. I think I briefly showed this in episode number 5, but this is really important to find and dig out signals. So let's set this contrast. We're going to go kind of over the top here to try and find where there are meteors that are fading up over my regional signals. So I already see a few of them. Let's just start from the bottom, which is the early part of this file, and work our way up. I'm going to pull this contrast even a little bit tighter. There we go. So here's something that looks like it could be a meteor burst. Let's check that out. Okay, we're going to turn the audio back on and find this again. So 96.7. I have a signal that is about 20 kilometers or 13, 15 miles away from me. It's a low power station, and it is just annoyingly present. And here, I'm not going to turn it up too loud because of music, but we can hear a very strong signal. Here's the local sounds like. Many of us would call that a semi-local type of signal quality. And then you can hear this meteor burst just coming way in very strong. And you can see an easy decode of a Canadian radio station about 500 miles, 700 kilometers from me, Leamington, Ontario, CHYR. Again, this frequency, just given this semi-local signal, would be a place where many DX'ers would not look for meteor scatter because it doesn't seem like an open frequency where meteors are possible. Yet, with this technology, we can hear it. We can at least hear some of the stronger meteors over top of our regional signals. So let's check out this one on 96.9, which doesn't look to be as strong, but maybe we'll get something.
Thank you to our sponsor, Amtrak. Amtrak is hiring.
This is the semi-local station. And you can just hear a brief burst of meteor on top of it. And I'm playing this over and over. And I always check down here in this RDS carrier to see if there's anything. I don't think there is. At least it's not strong enough to rise above the noise. So that's probably going to remain unlogged. Okay, let's see. There's another one here, 96.7. You can see my local signal has a relatively narrow bandwidth. It is not strongly modulated in its audio. So it does make it easy to see when stations fade up over it that have a normally modulated audio, which is a little bit wider, if you will. You'll see this is a very narrow signal, and right here you have this wide spot. So that's probably a station at least trying to fade up over my semi-local, over meteor scatter. So let's check it out. So you can hear one of the popular pop songs fading up over. It could be that station from Canada again, but not seeing any RDS decode. Let's, with it on mute, I'm going to check this out again, take a look at this carrier. Not really seeing anything. So let's maybe look for one more before we conclude this meteor scatter session. Now, I did want to point out, I have a challenging, many of you, I think, especially outside of the United States, might have some stations like this. And 97.3 is a local signal for me. It's just off the right-hand side of the screen, but you can see it creates this messy signal where it kind of leaks onto 97.1. So I do need to adjust the contrast a little bit to really get the potential meteor scatter signals to make themselves evident in the data analyzer. But you'll see there's something right here. And if I unmute, going back to our filter lesson in episode 3, you'll hear all the splatter. That horrible buzzing noise and muffled sound is coming from the adjacent 97.3, so I'm going to need to do some filter adjustment here to at least cut out some of that slop and try to focus in on this meteor. So let's kind of see where the meteor is. It's kind of focused around here. I can already see RDS popping up. Let's take a listen. All right, it sounds kind of like a classic rock song, and I get this ID here, WSRV, Gainesville, Georgia. It's also from the Atlanta area where we heard the 105.3. It was licensed to Bowden, Georgia. That is a very strong signal in the same area, and one of those signals that I hear a lot over Meteor Scatter on 97.1 over and over and over again. So I'm not going to put it in my logbook, but there it was. And if we just kind of adjust the contrast and look through the file, you can see the contrast is very important. We talked about contrast in episode number 2, and it's really important to see things both in the live waterfall and in review. So you might see one more meteor burst here. Now in this one, actually, I hear, I can't turn it up too loud because of the music, but I hear so underneath that music, there was a local phone number that was being read out. I only caught some of the digits, 569. But depending on how much information you might hear of something that sounds like a phone number in the United States, there's a very clear format that we use for phone numbers. The 3, 3, and 4, with the first 3 being the area code. It could be worth checking out and trying to do some Google research on perhaps what area code is 569. I'm not sure that that was the area code, but sometimes those context clues can be helpful with Meteor Scatter. I think that's pretty obvious for anyone that DX is. But depending on how serious you are about digging out signals, you can certainly listen for all the audio on these pings and see if you can hear even remote context clues that might help you identify something. And when I'm clicking around here as I talk, I see another RDS pop up here on 96.7, again, where I have that annoying local signal.
Lawrence followed me back. He wanted to know what was...
Sounds like a religious program.
Lawrence followed me back. He wanted to know what was... He wanted to...
Take a look at the 57 kilohertz here. You can see little bits of carrier popping up.
Lawrence followed me back. He wanted to know what was...
And when that carrier pops up over the noise, you start to see the RDS decode, another signal from South Carolina, which is adjacent to the state of Georgia, where we heard some of the other signals. So I haven't counted everything up because I've been talking and reviewing here, but I think we probably heard at least 4 or 5 different IDs from just a few minutes of review of these IQ files. So I hope that is helpful in helping you all use some of these tools to help dig out one of the most challenging modes of propagation, Meteor Scatter. Please do let me know what you thought about this down in the comments. Let me know if you have any cool Meteor Scatter experiences that you find using SDR Console and the data file analyzer. And I'll be back with you next time for eSkip, one of the most prolific and fun modes of propagation, where some of these tools also come very much in handy. And depending on the reception of these episodes, I might even pull out some of the really cool and rare and unique Aurora DX that we had in May of 2024, where I was able to save some files. It's really crazy to look at it using the data file analyzer and see just how intense some of the signals and the noise was during that big Aurora opening. And certainly, at least speaking here in June 2024, we hope to see more Aurora propagation soon. So I'm going to wrap at this point. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode. I'm Bryce Foster, signing out. Thank you.